Buju wago shindigu migizi indode gazaga squaji mekag indunjiba. I'd like to share a few tips today for those who are working on Indigenous language revitalization about lexical expansion. All languages shift and change over time. New technologies come into being, new concepts. Imagine even the English words that are very common to us now, like firewall and motherboard, words that might terrify somebody from even just a few decades ago. So we need to be able to do this with our Indigenous languages too, and ideally in a way that doesn't require us to import a whole bunch of loan words from colonial languages. Different Indigenous groups have handled this in different ways. The Hawaiians, for example, have a committee, and they might spend days debating and discussing and finally agreeing upon half a dozen words. It's a slow, methodical process that works really well for them to have great agreement and acceptance with the new terminology that they develop. That's the process that's right for them. I would do work with Ojibwe language, and we have a very different set of cultural norms and linguistic realities with Ojibwe. For us, one of the things that's really fascinating about the language is that the morphological components of Ojibwe, the smallest meaningful parts of words, tend to be more commonly known by everyday speakers. So as a result, it ends up being a little bit easier for us to create new words. So when the Ojibwe, for example, saw television, they didn't say, oh, TV, Asian Akadig. They ended up describing what they saw. In our case, Muzinate Sijigan. Muz is a root that pertains to any kind of image. Ate has to do with light, often reflected light, and the igan ending is common for inanimate nouns. So a Muzinate Sijigan is just an object that reflects an image through light and describes what a TV does. And for us, some of this is a natural and organic process, but we still have to be thoughtful about it. The Ojibwe are not one language. We're really a collection of interrelated dialects across a huge span of territory. And there's nothing like a dialect war or a writing system war to completely derail an emerging language revitalization effort. So here's what we've done. We usually gather some of our Jedi masters of the Ojibwe language, some of our really knowledgeable speakers, and we will query them about words and concepts. The more abstract the concept or the more uncommon the English word is, the more work it usually takes. And I remember when we were getting started with this, one of my esteemed elders, Eugene Stillday, was saying, Wagush, my native name, Wagush, I don't know why we're going to bother doing any of this. I don't know about algebra. I don't know what that means in English. I don't know what that means in Ojibwe. I don't care. You teach our kids about who we are as Anishinaabe. And while I couldn't agree with him more, I had to respond and say, Eugene, across the ocean in China, there are over 1 billion people learning algebra, and it doesn't make them less Chinese because they do it in their language. So you can help us to do this in our language, or you will force our children to learn about algebra only in a colonial language. And he looked at me for a minute and he said, okay, I'll help you, but I still don't know what algebra means in any language. And so we had to start, and it often helped putting up pictures. So for example, if we wanted to do something on, water tension levels or condensation, putting up a picture of the water table that showed images of, clouds condensing in the sky, water falling to the ground, water percolating into the soil. It was helpful for them to have those visuals to think about what it meant. So when I said, what would your word for condensation be? Everyone looked at me, like deer in the headlights until they saw the pictures. And then they said, oh, well, we have a bunch of words. So, like when the water comes together, like on the grass in the morning, well, here's how we'd say that. But it's a different word for us if it's the water that comes together on the glass, like when you're parked at the drive in movie theater for a long time. And then there's a different word if the water comes together in the air. And so all of a sudden, instead of a word for condensation, we had a whole bunch of very specific words related to different kinds of condensation. Ojibwe, in fact, was more descriptive and precise than English. And so the other things that we did, we would intentionally gather people from multiple dialects, knowing that they might not always have the same way of describing something, which is fine. So when we put up a word and said, all right, let's work around this, we had two different PowerPoints with projectors. And so one had the images that we wanted them to spin off of. And then the other one had lists of words that I was typing into a computer or some of my colleagues. And then as we went, we just captured everything that came out. And then we would go through that list of words together as a group. If everyone agreed on a word, then we just put it in a dictionary how it was. If they did not agree and someone said, well, that's what they say over there, but here's how we'd say it where I come from, we would put both words in the dictionary and we would code them by community. If there was community agreement, like the Panema speakers said, yeah, that's how we'd say it here. Or if it was just an individual, we would just code it by the person who came up with the word. And what I found out is that some speakers, like Majiko Neash, who grew up as a monolingual Ojibwe speaker, around monolingual Ojibwe speakers, ended up working on a construction crew where everybody was speaking Ojibwe. He had words for things like angle, square footage, pitch, stuff like that. And when he would share his words, sometimes someone like Eugene Stillday or Anna Gibbs would say, oh yeah, that makes sense, but here's how we'd say it where I come from. So in a way, they cross-pollinated without changing anyone else's dialect or vocabulary choices. And so they actually fed each other. And we ended up doing a number of dictionary projects like this. Asia Chigayung was one where we were trying to sleuth out words for some sometimes more archaic concepts and ancient ideas and things like that. And another one, Ani Nekadong, that was on modern lexical expansion. So we found the work to be really productive. In just a 3-day session, we often got a book's worth of vocabulary accomplished very, very quickly and with really pretty great agreement. And whenever there wasn't, we just captured any differences and documented them all. And I think that's really the beauty of this approach, is that you don't have to say one speaker's right and another one's wrong. They are all right and they are all empowered in the process. Good luck with all your really important language endeavors and lexical expansion. Miigwech. Thanks for watching today. I'm Anton Treuer. Let's keep in touch. I'm active on social media, and my website has lots of information on my books, speaking engagements, free Ojibwe language resources, resources for teachers, and more. Miigwech.